How's it going, everyone? Everybody caffeinated? Yeah, so awesome. Can I get my slides up, please? Yeah, so yeah, we had such a nice start with Pavel and Daniels, and hopefully I'll be able to pick up from where they left off. But they really set a very high standard. And I'll start, and a common theme in these two talks, and recently mostly on the communities, at least I am, is about the whole fear, uncertainty, and doubt about AI replacing us, right? And so please, let me just get started by justifying why I'm talking about what I'm talking today to you. And the first one, has anyone read this book or heard of this book and anything like that? This book is, yeah, this is a really great book. It's not about AI though. This book is about being a generalist or a specialist. So the point is, of course, is advocating towards generalists, basically because specialist is something that, I don't know, we're kind of hardwired to want to be. And so, like more recently, as Daniel was pointing out about the T-shaped kind of stuff, where you have a good breadth of understanding about a lot of things, but you can become specialist on some. So that's the point of being a generalist in this case. So this book goes through that. And basically, a specialist is usually that person that has like about 10,000 hours. Has everybody heard about that thing about you can be an expert on anything if you put 10,000 hours of training into that? There was, like, I have some background origin in the sports area, and that's very common over there. And then the other part, the generalist, is when you actually diversify your experiences. So yeah, essentially, I'm going to focus on the part of the pattern recognition and the broad perspective of things. But yeah, so what? It doesn't have anything to do with AI, and I said it was going to have, and I said it would lean down towards software development. Well, yes, so the point about specialists and generalists is about everyone's favorite topic today. And so part of this book, they have this little experiment where they had AI playing against chess grandmasters. And that's like a very, very old, it's before the ChatGPT. It was like that old AI from IBM that I forgot the name, sorry, not relevant. But yeah, they paired that with, and Kasparov played, it was like a huge buzz in the early 2000s that AI beat Kasparov, and everybody was like, oh my God. And then the study went on, actually, and they paired the grandmasters with AI to play against AI. And after a few try runs, they were able to get good at. But then there's a plot twist on this, because they paired with less experienced, not really rookies, just rookies compared to grandmasters, but good chess players, but they were not grandmasters, and they paired with AI to play against AI. And they actually had more success, had more early success. And then the big plot twist where the mic drops is they actually paired the rookies with AI against the grandmasters with AI. And the rookies actually gave them a run for their money. They even won at some points. And why is that? So they went down to this point, and Kasparov was one of the people who actually talk a lot about that. And the point about being a great grandmaster is about the pattern recognitions. So you play that game so much that you are able to, in a split second, identify patterns, and you're able to counteract to them. And of course, rookies lack that, or people less experienced lack that. But that was where AI would come in handy, because if there's anything that computers are good at is recognizing patterns and reproducing them. So the point that I'm trying to make is the masters were the specialists in this case. So they were able at doing amazing pattern recognition techniques. And that led to have really quick tactics. So they were able to, on the fly, be able to adapt what they were supposed to do, or if even like switch, like what were the technique and what were they were trying to accomplish on that. While the generalists, in this case, they have a more holistic perspective. So they know they want to win the game, essentially, but they actually are looking at the broader view, like what are they doing, and they are not going on a move by move. They are actually going like a few moves ahead. I want to be able to accomplish this. I want to be able to get this piece or take this area and so on. But they don't go piece by piece, so that's not tactics. That's just like the whole strategy. So it's more of a long-term strategy in this case. And here, for example, some very good specialists that we are familiar with. So that one is, I forgot his name, Yes, Magnus Carlsen, yes, great chess player. And today he's really good at that version of chess where you have like just a very limited amount of time, like it's a quick chess or, what? Yes, sorry, can hear you, yeah. So that one here, Tom Brady, most successful quarterback, and that over there is Aaron Rodgers. I really like NFL, and for the ones that are not familiar with it, sorry. So in the NFL, the quarterback is face-to-face with 11 other people that are trying to run him over like a truck. And they have a timer with a few seconds where they need to decide where they're going to try to put the ball. And what Aaron Rodgers is very good at doing is they have this little count that for us means nothing, but they're actually deciding the play. And he switches the interval between each step of the count, and that kind of tricks the other players into moving. And in moving, they kind of point out where they are supposing to go. And with that very little movement, he's able to identify the pattern, like which kind of, if they're doing like coverage by zone or man-to-man and so on. And then he can change the play, which is called an audible, essentially switching the tactics. So in that little split second that me, even as much NFL as I watch, I cannot understand, they're able to do that. And of course, you have the ones in the middle, like in all the other AI in LLMs. They're really good at that. LLMs are really good at having all the patterns. We even make the joke that if you feed an LLM bad code, it's going to output bad code because those are the patterns that they do. But with all that, and I believe Pavel made it really clear at his talk, LLMs are really good at writing code at this point. They're really good at reasoning, and they're really good at doing the code. So essentially, they are the specialists in writing code, and they're becoming more and more so, which leads to us, as Daniel pointed out, being the drivers and being essentially the leads in defining what kind of code the LLM is going to do. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is, doesn't matter the tool you use, and doesn't matter how many lines of code you output per day, or if you're really good at implementing a rate limiter, or if you're really good at doing this or that, and so on. Or even writing code without that passes first time against a linter or something like that, because LLMs are good. As a matter of fact, we paired with the Angular team in experimenting with their benchmarking tool, and with a single prompt, a colleague of mine was able to get a perfect score. By tweaking the prompt, by understanding how the LLM was going to work with Solid.js and so on, we're able to get that. So the point is, going forward, will LLM take our jobs? Partially, yes. They're going to take the laborious part. They're going to take the part where we're actually probably typing the code all the time, but it still needs a human to look at that, to understand where they want to go, to understand the roadmap, to communicate the success criteria and the priorities, and to make sure that this is going towards the right direction. So let's get strategic, right? So as Sun Tzu said, we need to know our requirements and we need to know our tools. And if we know that, we don't need to fear like any kind of jobs requirements and so on. And finally, that means I get to the point I was going to talk to you about, which is single-page applications and multi-page applications. Because the first step of being able to write good strategies is understanding how our frameworks, how our tools, or how our apps work. So in order to talk to you about what us framework developers and maintainers are going towards to the future, let's take a look back. Because a lot of the ideas that we have today come from like about 10 years ago, where we actually started this movement about bringing more of the business logic to the front end. But every now and then it's good to look back so we can evaluate things from first principles, right? So it started with a URL, right? So we have the app.com and so on. And the problem 10 years ago is that it started with a single URL. And then we started having a bunch of hashes. And that's complicated because the browser, we didn't have the history API. We didn't, like, this is what a hash router is. And in the end, what the browser would know is that this was only a single route. So that's where the name comes from, single page application, I guess. And because of that, there were issues with like search engines. There were issues about identifying the assets of each route. There were issues about the backend knowing what is this and what is that. And so somebody coined the term that single pages are the devil. And the thing is, nobody stood still after we realized that. What happened is that the platform reacted to this and was like, okay, so people are trying to go this way, and we saw some value on this way. It's not working well, but that's because there are limitations in our ecosystem. But turns out that after a few years, actually, it depends a lot. Of course, there is a way to write horrible single-page applications, but they're not essentially the villains. There is, and it shouldn't be this dichotomy about either you like one or you don't like one, and it's one or the other. Because what I believe, like my opinion and what I think is best is, like for all apps, is we need good performance and user experience, right? We want the good performance of multi-page apps, so low bundle size, being able to adapt to the back end, and connecting to them in a very easy way. But we also want the great user experience from single-page applications, because nothing is as bad as when you click a link and then things go blank, and then at some point your data is coming from the server and you're not seeing anything. And then if there is like a problem in connection, you're not seeing, you don't get any feedback, because essentially every time you do a hard navigation, the browser is tossing you all the way, or your user all the way to the server, and the server is going to come back with something, and then you basically resume the experience. But there is a moment that the browser has no idea where the user is gone. And that kind of jeopardizes a lot of how you are going to understand how your users are using your app and the experience, because in the end, if every page is a hard request, there's a lot of things that need to be done again. And nobody likes redundant work. One answer from the platform was the view transitions. And they're great, they're awesome, they're a great step forward, but they're not quite there yet for actually leveling the playing field against the single-page apps. They're very close, but they're not the same. And here's where the shortcomings. So they cannot share state between routes, they cannot prefetch resources, they cannot do the data mutation. So every time you're doing a data mutation, you're going to have all the round trips and so on. And you cannot do request deduplication. So if based on a view transition, an app with just view transitions, you don't know like if what resources are coming from the next route. You don't know if the resources that are coming from the next route are already there. You don't know if that page is going to request like a bunch of resources, if any of them are actually returning the same thing, and so on. So in this idea and with this motivation of having the best of two worlds, in 2022, Rich Harris, the creator of Svelte, tried to coin the term transitional apps, which is more or less, I think, the time where he released SvelteKit. And the idea was great. The naming was horrible. It was not good, didn't stick. But the idea is really great. After that, I believe Kenzie Dot said something about PEPSPAS, so enhanced single-page apps and so on. We talked about hybrid apps and etc. The naming doesn't matter, to be honest. What does matter is this motivation, and that's where frameworks have been going since 2022 or even earlier. Fast forward to like last year, Ryan Carniato had this really good talk, in my opinion, called the Front-End Existential Crisis, where he touches these topics and he goes a little bit deeper on what we can do and so on about it. But the gist of it all is that right now the web is a huge spectrum and it has two ends. You have the content-focused apps, which are really good, which are a really good fit for MPAs, and you have single-page apps. But that's not it. It's not a switch you toggle. It's a huge spectrum, and there's a big overlap in the middle. So like, if you go for the MPA side, you get the marketing pages, which are those static, which is like a blog that has no interaction, and so on. On the other side, you have apps like Airtable, and so on. Somewhere towards an app, you have the stateful apps, which is like, they have some static content, but they really depend on interactivity to be useful. And then on the other side, from marketing, coming from marketing, you have those publishing pages that have a lot of stuff that that require like some dynamic stuff, content that is dynamic in essence, not necessarily interactive, but dynamic. And right in the middle, you have e-commerce, where e-commerce is like a single-page application, but they need to be static in a lot of things, and they need to be fast because, you know, like there's a very nice article in the web dev in the Google web.dev blog. It's called "Seconds Are Worth Millions," and it's a really good read if you care about performance, if you care about top-of-funnel conversion, and so on. So e-commerces are right in the middle, and they are like the tough thing to solve. So to summarize, all this jibber-jabber I've been talking about is we want an MPA on the server. If somebody does a hard request, a specific route, we want to be able to give to them the whole thing, instead of just sending a blank HTML with a list of resources and a manifest that they will fetch. So we want to give them the static thing, and then the browser can do. But if they are on the client, I want to fetch only what I want to fetch as early as possible. So I want to prefetch stuff, and I want to fetch only what I don't have. So I want to deduplicate stuff, and I don't want to lose contact with my client. So I know how much time they're actually going, how much time they're waiting, what's the latency, and so on. And Werner Vogels, 2 years ago in the AWS reInvent, he coined this, he had this little quote, which was not necessarily talking about JavaScript frameworks, but they could be talking about really anything in software development, is that we want to give people primitives, not frameworks. We don't want to tell you what to do, how to do. We don't want you to write code with our opinions. Essentially, like, we're now coming to we're closing the circle on the whole Webpack configuration that Daniel mentioned. And now that we have good primitives to write nice bundlers and configuration, we want to give them to the users, and the users are going to plug and play as they want. And that comes to the open source projects that I'm more familiar with and work with. I call them the starts because there are two. There's Solid Start, that's from the Solid.js community. That's the one I'm the lead maintainer, and Tanstack Start, which is our sibling framework on the Tanstack side. And so Solid Start was the older one that became, and the point of Solid Start was being really good with concurrent requests, having a really strong serialization, which means the duplication both on requests coming out and resources coming down the wire, a modular approach so you can pick and play as you want, and build with already existing tech. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to stand on the shoulders of open source. Tanstack saw that and said, oh, that's really cool. So they kind of copied our homework on 2024. So Tanstack Start is basically, at that time, was solid start, but with React as the view library. And then fast forward, now we are copying their homework because as Vite progressed, they were able to give us even better primitives, and now we are using this, we're getting closer to use the same architecture as they are. They are not 1.0 yet. We had a 1.0, but we are working towards the 2.0. And the architecture that I'm talking about is this. So the bundler and server, we're using Nitro, same one as Nuxt, same one as Analog, we're going to see soon. And with Vite, we use a Tanstack plugin for the server functions. So it's like the code extraction and so on. Then you have the serializer, which is a Solid.js core member who created Ceroval. Hands down, best serializer. It deduplicates things twice, has some referential checks. It's awesome. There's a whole talk just about the serializer that is worth geeking out if you want to know more. Find me in the hallway track. And then in the Tanstack side, their first class citizen is Tanstack Router. And then for the UI library, you can choose Solid or React. For Solid Start, it's pretty much the same going forward, but we also have the Solid router, and we only support Solid as a UI library. So how does that look like? This is a project config. It's a Vite configuration. You add some plugins, and boom, things work. And that's exactly, and this is actually the Vite config of a production app that I have in my work. So this app we launched, and we're using that config. So it's pretty good. Like, yeah, not exactly that config. So I'm using the Vite plugin that I created, and I'm also using Tailwind, but basically that. So my point is that the web is a fetch fest, and that's why you need a framework. That's why you need a serializer. That's why you need prefetch, resources, and so on. There's a bunch of fetch requests that happen on every possible page. Even more so if you have like a chat app. And why are e-commerce right in the middle? Because they're both. It's a static site that has a single page application right down at the bottom, and a bunch of static, maybe some dynamic content, maybe a video. And because it is an e-commerce, there's like the shopping cart, which is another app, and then there's a lot of scripts from like marketing and tracking and this and that. So that comes down to a router. And the router is the thing that's going to do or break a framework or a meta framework in this case. And that's why we still need to use existing tools, and you wouldn't want to go and build it yourself, because these are all the kinds of stuff that a router is responsible for doing for you. And implementing them from scratch is really hard. A shout out to these three. Caching. I think I don't need to tell you that most of the bugs in production apps are caching. Then updating resources and parallelizing them. Handling with concurrent requests is very hard. And that's one of the features that right now, I think it only exists in Solid Start, but they're coming to Tanstack Start as well. I don't know if any other framework is doing that, which is something that we call single flight mutations. And that is when, let's think for a second, you're logging in to any kind of dashboard. And you have that login form where you put the username and you put the password, right? And you write the right username, you write the right password. Usually, the way it goes is you send the data with the username and password. The server authenticates you and says, okay, this person can go in, so let's send them to /dashboard. And then they send back to the server, to the client, a redirect send them to the dashboard. They're in. Then the client moves them to the dashboard. And then they want to go to the dashboard, but they don't know what's in the dashboard. So they send back to the server, okay, send me the data for this user. And then you get to this. So these are like 2 flights. There's 2 round trips. You go, you come back, you go, you come back. The point, though, for us is if I'm a full stack app and I have created this manifest where I know all the routes in this app, and I am prefetching resources, so I know all resources that every route needs. Why do I need 2 requests to give them a page if I already know I'm sending them to that page? So that's what single flight mutations are. And that's what my demo is today. So I put this demo open source, so you can go there and see if you want. You can even run with me. It's pretty cool. And it uses like a proper database as well. There's a little README here. Please shout if you cannot see, but you cannot read properly. But there's a little README. There's 2 requirements. Everything you just pnpm dev, pnpm install and build, and you're good. And we have 2 little routes. So what is going to happen is I have this little database with a bunch of Pokemon. And you see there's like no .env. That's why you can come, though there is a database. What I'm going to do is here, whenever I start my dev server for the first time, it's going to create a database and push the data over there. So let's dev. So my Vite plugin is going to figure out this bot check I need to remove. And now the Wi-Fi is checking if I am a real person. And yep, back. So now my database is created. You see I got my .env. So now things should be working on my browser. OK, so this is coming from my database. And I have all these Pokemons and so on. So now I'm going to create a Pokemon for myself. And first of all, network tab, fetch requests. So first, this is like the default experience on the web. You come to the multi-page app, and we are going to do multi-flight Pokemon. And can somebody shout a Pokemon that you like? Metapod. Oh my God, where is it? There you go. So I'm going to create this Pokemon that's going to look like a Metapod, but it's called multi-flight. And then you see there's 1 request that goes to the server to create. So it's actually inserting the data in my backend. And then as I redirect, it fetches my Pokemon again. And boom, here you go. You have the Metapod over here. Right? So that's the default experience. That's what all of us are used to. You append some data, and then once you redirect, you fetch the data again. But that's redundant work, because I already know which route you're going. I already know you want to append the list with the new request, right? And the way it looks in the code is actually also pretty straightforward in a sense. I have my multi-flight one has this little form where I'm going to call it to add. So I submit the form, I add, and that's it. Nothing too special. The single flight also looks the same. The difference is that I will then, I'm going to try to pre-render the request from the single flight. And so when I come back, I need to clean up things. And now I'm going to the single add. And now I'm going to do single flight. And I'm going to do who? Icons, whatever. So as I click here, there's only 1 request. And icons already here. Because the response from this is not sending me, is sending me the redirect, but is sending with the redirect the data of the new page. And that is the point of the single flight request. So it's one less round trip, it's less time you spend with the client waiting. And the magic in this case is only in this little place over here. Because I am exporting a route, and this, we actually renaming this. Load still works, but to be more truth to what is supposed to be happening, it's a preload. So the preload is going to instruct the framework, solid start, that this route is always going to try to preload this thing. So by the moment my backend is going to trigger the redirect, it's going to know which route it's going and start fetching the resources, and then sends the resource together with the redirect. So all the data is already in the client when they want to redirect. And yeah, so that's the demo. You can run it over there if you want. You can pick apart, and if there's any doubts, please let me know. And, I need to present it again, sorry. So, okay, but if you want to write something from scratch, how do you get started with either of these frameworks? You can pre-npm create Tanstack, and it's going to guide you through. You're going to pick a lot of, like there's a bunch of prompts. And in the same way with Solid, you can just pick whatever you want and create with that. So that's what I had for you. Thank you very much. You can find me on any social media. Thank you, thank you.